In Ukraine, some of the largest Russian strikes since the full-scale invasion leave behind fire and rubble.
There were two powerful explosions, one after the other. Everything flew out of the cupboards. Everything was covered in glass.
As the search for a resolution to the war continues, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reshuffles his cabinet. And in the U.S., the Department of Justice says a foreign digital influence campaign targeting the presidential election was orchestrated by Russia.
We have no tolerance for attempts by authoritarian regimes to exploit our democratic system of government.
We look at how Russia's attempts to undermine American politics is part of its confrontation with the West.
They've declared war, full-scale, hot war, information war on the rest of the world.
Welcome to PBS News Weekly. I'm Nick Schifrin. This week we zero in on Russia, its ongoing war in Ukraine, and its ongoing war online. Up first, Ukraine. This week, President Volodymyr Zelensky shook up his cabinet, including pushing out popular Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. Zelensky and his powerful chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, were criticized for sidelining a potential political rival. But Zelensky said the country's war effort needed fresh faces.
I am very grateful to the ministers and the entire cabinet team who worked for Ukraine for the sake of Ukrainians. Today we need new energy, and these steps are connected. They are only connected with strengthening our state in various areas. International politics and diplomacy are no exception.
The shakeup came just a day after one of Russia's deadliest attacks of the war, ballistic missile strikes on the Ukrainian military academy that killed more than 50 people. Hundreds of miles from the front line, Russia's ballistic missiles struck so quickly, Ukrainian cadets had no time to search for safety. A military school building and a nearby hospital both destroyed, and nearby homes damaged. Violence has shattered this and every Ukrainian city, and residents long ago forgot what it feels like to be safe. Alexander cleaned up his broken window.
There were two powerful explosions, one after the other. Everything flew out of the cupboards. Everything was covered in glass.
And a nearby school dusted itself off despite the danger, said 12-year-old Alisa Stebel.
It was scary. Fear, panic. I don't know how to describe it. I was worried for my parents and my sister, for my loved ones.
Once again, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky argued the attack should unshackle U.S. restrictions on long-range American weapons.
Air defense systems and missiles are needed in Ukraine, not in a warehouse somewhere. Long-range strikes that can defend against Russian terror are needed now, not sometime later. Every day of delay, unfortunately, means more lives lost.
And there were more lives lost early today in Zaporizhia. Police pulled out the bodies of victims of a Russian strike on a hotel. By daylight, among the dead, a woman and her 8-year-old son. Zaporizhia is home to Europe's largest nuclear power plant, occupied by Russia since the war's first days. Yesterday, the plant's external power source was hit with artillery. In Ukraine, International Atomic Energy Agency head Rafael Grossi warned that could lead to the plant losing the power it needs to cool its reactor.
I have very often characterized it as very fragile. With for some days we have some stability, and then the next day there is an event, an issue, a drone impact. The situation is very serious indeed.
In recent weeks, Russian forces have driven deeper toward Pokrovsk, a key transportation hub in eastern Ukraine for the Ukrainian military. At the same time, Ukraine has sent its forces into Russia's Kursk region, in the largest incursion onto Russian soil since World War II. And in the south, Ukraine is now using American weapons in Russian-occupied Crimea and making progress. In a war where Ukraine struggles to hold the line, Ukraine boasts, with highly produced videos, a theater of success. Russian-occupied Crimea, where Russian boats have gone up in smoke. Ukraine has 0 warships, but Kyiv and Washington say Ukrainian sea drones have destroyed more than a dozen Russian ships. And now, Ukraine has unleashed on Crimea its most powerful American weapon, the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS. A U.S. official tells PBS NewsHour the U.S. has sent Ukraine hundreds of missiles, each with a range of nearly 190 miles and a price tag of $1.3 million.
I'm announcing an emergency package of security assistance of $300 million.
After lengthy internal debate and external pressure, the administration first authorized ATACMS for Ukraine in mid-March. And U.S. officials say Ukraine first used them in mid-April, this strike on a Russian airfield in occupied Crimea.
ATACMS can help Ukraine achieve the goal of making the Crimean Peninsula uninhabitable for Russian Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges is the former commander of U.S. Army Europe. He's long argued the road to Ukrainian victory runs through Crimea, whose 2014 annexation is one of President Vladimir Putin's crowning achievements and where the Russian military has expanded ever since.
Now Ukraine has enough ATACMS to be able to hit all the airfields, every ship that's in Sevastopol in the harbor, and other important facilities. That's the goal, make that place untenable for Russian forces.
U.S. officials confirm ATACMS helped sink a Russian submarine last weekend and have damaged or destroyed Russian airfields and at least a dozen Russian air defense batteries in Crimea, including some of Russia's most advanced, S-300s and S-400s. And among the warships, the Cyclone, one of the first sunk by a ballistic missile. Ukraine's attacks helped force Russia's most valuable naval assets out of Crimea into southern Russia.
When I was young, so much younger than today.
A feat first accomplished with long-range British Storm Shadow missiles that Ukraine has been launching since last year.
These hits matter a lot, partly because of the fact that the Russians cannot replace them. Crimea is a launching pad of all sorts of different missiles, rockets, drones that are hitting civilian infrastructure. The ability to do that has been significantly reduced.
These tactical gains help advance a strategic goal, keep Ukrainian commerce flowing through the Black Sea. Ukraine's food exports now match or even exceed levels from before the full-scale invasion. That income is critical to keep Ukraine's government afloat so it can pay soldiers' salaries and to Ukraine's long-term $500 billion reconstruction.
Over the course of this war, Ukraine has gained an entirely new status in the Black Sea. This region will now always be free from Russian dominance.
The U.S. and Ukraine also say ATACMS could challenge Russian supply lines into Crimea, including via ferry. U.S. officials confirm ATACMS damaged 2 ferries that Russia uses to move fuel and ammunition, and Ukraine destroyed the third. Those strikes penetrated one of the most fortified air defenses on the planet around the Kerch Bridge, which connects Crimea to mainland Russia. Ukraine set it ablaze in October 2022 with an improvised explosive device that Russia said was equivalent to 10 tons of TNT. In December 2022, Putin took a drive to reassure Russians the bridge was solid. In July 2023, a Ukrainian sea drone hit it again. But U.S. officials confirm that Russia has shot down ATACMS, including in late June, when shrapnel from a shot-down missile that was aimed at a military target instead rained down on beachgoers. Russian media showed sun loungers used as stretchers, and Russian officials said the strike killed at least 4 people, including children, and wounded 150 more. If the U.S. and Ukraine want Crimeans to feel unsafe, tourists told local journalists it's working.
We hope for the best, but of course, deep inside we have a sense of danger.
But the biggest danger to Ukraine exists far from Crimea. In the east, Ukraine has struggled to hold the line after shortages of manpower and munitions. Some experts question whether Crimea is the most vital front for an American weapon in relatively short supply.
This is of great significance, but it doesn't critically affect the overall future of the war.
Anatol Levin directs the Quincy Institute's Eurasia program. He says ATACMS would be better saved for an expected Russian offensive.
There is therefore a case for the Ukrainians conserving their ATACMS and other weapons and ammunition for that moment.
Ukraine also wants to use ATACMS elsewhere, inside Russia, especially on bases with planes that drop devastating 2,000-pound bombs. But the U.S. restricts ATACMS use to inside Ukraine.
We can protect our cities from Russian guided bombs if American leadership makes a step forward and allows us to destroy Russian military aircrafts on their bases.
But until the U.S. takes that step, Crimea is a concentrated target and an example of Ukrainian success in a war of attrition with no end in sight. Russia's war extends well beyond Ukraine. This week, the Department of Justice unveiled details of what it called Kremlin-backed operations targeting the U.S. presidential election. In a press conference Wednesday, Attorney General Merrick Garland outlined what he called sophisticated disinformation campaigns undertaken by Russia and other adversaries, promoting lies via fake news outlets and real social media influencers.
We have no tolerance for attempts by authoritarian regimes to exploit our democratic system of government. We will be relentlessly aggressive in countering and disrupting attempts by Russia and Iran, as well as China or any other foreign malign actor to interfere in our elections and undermine our democracy.
Amna Nawaz discussed the developments with National Security Council spokesman John Kirby.
Before we dig into some of the specifics today, big picture and briefly, what does all of this say to you about how Russian election interference has evolved over the years?
Well, they've gotten more sophisticated, they've gotten more organized, and quite frankly, they've gotten more funding. Support right at the top of the Kremlin. We believe Mr. Putin is witting of this scheme, or these schemes, I should say. There's more than one. But they've gotten a lot more clever. And unfortunately for them, we've gotten pretty clever too. We've gotten pretty smart as well. We were able to detect and monitor these threats, and as you saw today, take action to hold them accountable.
So one of these schemes, as you put it, let's kind of break it down here. The Department of Justice has charged 2 employees of a Russian state-controlled media outlet, RT, saying that they poured $10 million into an effort to distribute content with hidden Russian government messaging. What kind of messaging are we talking about, and where might people have seen that?
Well, a great example of the messaging, for instance, was blaming Ukraine and the United States for the terrorist attack that happened in Moscow several months ago, that we all know was conducted by ISIS. Even ISIS acknowledged that they conducted that attack on that concert hall. So that was one example. Another example was continuing to put out information to undermine Ukraine's fight for its own democracy and for its sovereignty. So it's messaging and disinformation. It's propaganda that tries to undermine public support for what Ukraine's trying to do to defend itself. And a range of other things that Russia wants to do to sort of portray the United States as some sort of evil actor in the world. So there's a series of initiatives that they're undertaking, again, to undermine faith and confidence in democracy writ large, certainly undermine faith and confidence in America's democracy.
One of the other schemes laid out was related to the Department of Justice seizing 32 internet domains that they say were used to spread Russian propaganda with the aim of influencing voters in the U.S. and foreign elections, including the U.S. 2024 presidential election. I just want to show for viewers here, the websites were designed to look like U.S. information and news sites like these that you're seeing right now that look exactly like Washington Post articles, but they are not. Admiral Kirby, can these kinds of sites be taken down faster than they can keep going up? Is it safe to assume this information's still out there?
Well, we're certainly going to keep having conversations with tech companies about making sure they're aware of these threats and these actors out there. We have to, rely on them to take the decisions that they deem are appropriate to their own policies and procedures. But we're certainly going to keep having that conversation with tech companies. But I think what you're seeing here, and I'm glad you mentioned the Social Design Agency and what they've been doing as well, is, on one hand, you've got them using RT, a former propaganda outlet, now just a full-on covert influence organization, to work through funding companies, even a company here in the United States, to get them to push information out in the vein of a legitimate media outlet. And they also working at a tactical level with social media influencers. Many of them, as the Attorney General laid out, are simply made up. They're fictional persona. But they're going at it from a media outlet perspective, and they're going at it from an individual social media user perspective.
But when it comes to influencing, especially the 2024 presidential election, Attorney General Garland said that they're seeking a preferred outcome here. What is that preferred outcome? What do you see this Russian propaganda working towards?
They are working towards undermining U.S. policies, the kinds of U.S. policies that this administration has been laboring so hard to pursue around the world, shoring up alliances and partnerships in the Indo-Pacific, supporting Ukraine, obviously.
But is that to say that they're working to undermine the Democratic candidate, in this case Kamala Harris?
I don't have specific evidence that I can speak to about undermining a particular candidate, but we have seen in the past where Mr. Putin certainly has shown a proclivity for one particular candidate. But I don't want to get ahead of where we are right now. Where we are right now is we know that they are using these tools, these vehicles, this funding to sow discord and try to increase disunity here in the United States.
Wouldn't it help people, though, to spot some of this disinformation if they knew if it tended to lean one way or the other?
Well, look, that's one of the things that we did today. Why the Attorney General went public. That's why we here at the White House laid it out, the State Department, the Treasury. I mean, part of the aim of educating the American people is to disclose what we're seeing out there and the kinds of content that they're putting out there. And as I said in my opening statement today in the briefing room, it can't just be the government doing this. We need the help of American citizens to bear a hand here and to carefully and scrupulously take a look at what you're digesting, the news information that you're getting online or elsewhere, to try to make sure that you're getting the absolute best, credible, most accurate information you can.
It is also worth pointing out people start voting in this election very soon, within days. And the last day of voting, Election Day, is just over 60 days away. A lot of this content has already been out there for a while, has had millions of views. Are these steps and actions coming too late to have an impact?
Well, we certainly hope not. I mean, I would just tell you that the timing today was driven by the scope of the investigation that the Attorney General talked about, and he made it clear it's an ongoing investigation. So there may be additional actions here coming. I don't know. But it was driven really by the status of the investigation. That was what was really on our minds. And as soon as we could package all that information up and get it out into the public domain, we wanted to do that.
That's the National Security Council spokesman, Admiral John Kirby, joining us from the White House tonight. Sir, thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Moscow's attempts to interfere in U.S. and other elections are nothing new, though their tactics constantly evolve. Before the Justice Department's announcement this week, Special Correspondent Simon Ostrovsky sat down with an investigative journalist who spent years uncovering Russian operations about yet another effort to sow doubt and chaos about the democratic process, this time using artificial intelligence.
Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service has a new plan to influence Western countries in this election year. Russia's CIA, which goes by its initials too, SVR, plans to use artificial intelligence to mask a sophisticated effort to interfere in a third straight U.S. presidential election. First, a quick tour of 2016.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
Russian intelligence hacked the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign chair. Thousands of emails were then dumped in a coordinated fashion to influence the race. And that's not to mention the operations of Russian troll farms that created thousands of digital sock puppet soldiers to repeat and repeat and repeat messages that boosted Donald Trump at Hillary Clinton's expense.
They've declared war, full-scale hot war, information war on the rest of the world.
The man who helped uncover this new effort is Christo Grozev, an investigative journalist who's unmasked many intelligence operations. Perhaps most famously, he found the operatives who poisoned the late Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny in 2020, and helped Navalny, who died in a Russian prison this past February, confront one of his assailants.
You've discovered a program that the Russian security services are trying to develop. What is this program actually about?
We got access to a mailbox belonging to a senior intelligence officer working under cover of a commercial company in Russia. And that mailbox contained initially reports that criticized the handling of the global propaganda effort by Russia, saying we're losing to the West, we're losing to the Ukrainians. Everybody loves Ukraine, everybody hates Russia. We have to change something about this. They've decided to use AI and use all kind of new methods to make it indistinguishable from the regular flow of information we're getting.
We know that Russia has been trying to pit Western societies against themselves, at least since the 2016 election. What's different about this new effort that you've discovered?
They will infiltrate Western organizations, some of them organizations that are even in defense of Western values. They're going to infiltrate pro-Ukrainian organizations, and within those organizations create disruption. They're going to make unreasonable demands to Western leaders, making Western societies tire and get annoyed with these Ukrainian demands, in quotation marks. They're no longer going to defend Russia. They're going to just cause disruption within Western societies.
They're no longer going to be trying to convince our societies that Russia's great. They're just going to use various different methods to make us angry at each other, angry at our allies, angry at Ukraine.
That is exactly so, and that's both bad news and good news. The good news part of it is that they realize that the ship has sailed on trying to convince the rest of the world that Russia is a power for good.
Who's taking the lead in this project? Who's running it?
This is the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia. And
traditionally, the
SVR. They're essentially criticizing the other agencies as having failed so far. And they've propositioned this to the Kremlin as, let us take care of this, we know how to do it better. And initially we thought this may be just one proposal that may not have been accepted, but follow-up documents that we found show us that the program has been approved, recruitment has started, and there's even a document, which is a letter to the head of the SVR, Naryshkin, which instructs him to allocate particular people to this program who will work under the cover of Kremlin officials.
Is there anything you can tell me about how you got this information?
Since the war started, the source of data from Russian databases has become both harder to get and easier to get. Harder because there's a lot of clampdown on data providers, and easier because there are so many whistleblowers and hacktivists, actually Russian hackers, who go and hack mailboxes of government officials. And the latter is what happened with us right now. The name of the author of the program is Mikhail Kolesov. And interestingly, he admits to being a high-level SVR officer in his own CV that I've made available to you.
In his resume?
In his resume.
Incredible.
Kolesov's resume states that he's worked for the Foreign Intelligence Service of Russia since 2001 and oversees 40 agents. He lists among his achievements the rollout of 1,500 propaganda campaigns that supported achieving Russia's goals in the international arena. He also boasts of receiving a medal in 2019 for developing new sources of information for the country's top leadership. Grozev was also able to obtain Kolesov's ID badge from an email attachment, revealing the SVR agent's face for the first time.
Notably, he has two different resumes in his mailbox, one for the common people like you and us, and for the real bosses, he actually admits to having worked for the last 19 years as a senior officer at the SVR. And the SVR officer who is delegated to this program, who's seconded to this program and travels around the world, his name is Andrei Sherbakov. And he has a diplomatic passport, and we expect he will be able to travel to Western Europe and the United States. Maybe not after this program.
I read in one of the documents that you got access to that they plan on actually hijacking our personal communication devices. What does that mean?
They plan to do insertion of advertising, which is in fact hidden as news, and in this way bombard the target population with things that may be misconstrued as news, but are in fact advertising content. They plan to disguise that advertising content on a person-to-person level as if it is content from their favorite news sites. Now, we haven't seen that in action, but it's an intent, and they claim they've developed the technology to do that. They're very explicit that they're not going to use Russia-related platforms or even separate platforms. They're going to infiltrate the platform that the target already uses. And that is what sounds scary. If they've developed anything like that, then we would not know that one sentence from what we read in the New York Times, for example, has been altered just for you as a reader to mislead you in what the content, the meaning of the article is.
Then the target is you and I and the general public.
The target is the general public on a mass but custom-made scale. They specifically talk about using AI to customize the message based on the biases and preferences of each individual user. And while before they couldn't do that even with a troll farm run by Prigozhin in St. Petersburg of 10,000 people, because you can only customize it to 10,000 targets. Now with AI, you can do that to tens of millions of people.
The documents hacked from Kolosov's inbox describe in stilted bureaucratic language an ambitious plan to shake the so-called main adversary, aka the West, to its very foundations by secretly influencing key figures with new disinformation techniques. The text reads, "It is proposed that the theme of our campaign in countries of the main adversary be the stimulation of fear in recipients, the strongest emotion in human psychology."
The same team from Russia's foreign intelligence that is behind this global program is doing specific hit jobs on specific enemies of the Russian state. These hit jobs go under the cover program name Ledorub, which means ice pick, because ice pick is what Stalin organized the assassination of Trotsky with last century. And there's no doubt that this is the meaning of this character assassination tool.
Now it seems like they're being much more targeted and trying to essentially send disinformation to specific key individuals around a target.
They have a term in Russian which is to make him unhandshakeable, somebody that nobody will want to engage with on a day-to-day basis.
The program's goals are, of course, much broader than individual Kremlin opponents, and is one more thing for U.S. news consumers to watch for as the election approaches. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Simon Ostrovsky in New York.
And that's it for this week's episode of PBS News Weekly. For all of us, thanks so much for watching.